We'll begin in just a moment. Just going to give another moment or so for folks to join, and then we'll kick things off. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining from. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. My name is David Lenars, and I am a founder and president of Registrar Corp. Since 2003, Registrar Corp has been assisting firms here in the United States and from over 190 countries with US FDA regulations. We're excited to have you join us for our webinar today titled, What Happens During a US FDA Food Inspection? Please note that there will be a second webinar on responding to FDA inspections on November 4th, and we hope you will join us for that webinar also. Let me introduce our speaker today. If we can move forward a slide, please. There we go. Today's speaker is Larry Stringer. Larry worked for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for more than 34 years. During that time, he held many positions. He was a field investigator in Chicago and West Virginia, where he inspected a wide range of food facilities. He conducted inspections in both the United States and abroad. He supervised investigators, including FDA expert investigators, and in his last 7 years, he was in charge of a group of experts responsible for development of assignments and various guidance documents, including the Investigations Operations Manual, otherwise known as IOM, guidance on conducting inspections during COVID, and guidance on conducting remote regulatory assessments. So Larry literally wrote the book on FDA food facility inspections. Larry was a lead trainer for new investigators in collecting and developing evidence during inspections and investigations. He retired from FDA earlier this year and now consults both with Registrar and Canal Row Advisors, a consulting firm based in Washington, D.C. So Larry, welcome. It's great to have you with us here. You have incredible experience. We have a large crowd today from literally all over the world, and we are excited to hear from you from the insider perspective, the FDA perspective of what happens when FDA shows up at a facility to actually conduct an inspection. So Larry, I'll turn it over to you. We will have time at the end for questions, and this presentation will be made available afterwards for viewers, but feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go. So Larry, take it away.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Wow, it's funny to hear your own background sometimes. We're gonna, I apologize. I'll be covering several areas, but and you can see the agenda, but my primary plan is to take you kind of behind the scenes, show you what FDA investigators are taught, what they may be thinking and what they're doing when they're not at your firm, when they're back in the office. I want to teach you about what they are expected to do. I also want to help you make inspections go as smoothly and quickly as possible. There will be time at the end for you to ask questions, and I will do my best to answer as many as I can. So as David mentioned, this is the first of a two-part series on FDA inspections. The second one will cover everything from 483 through the close of an FDA case or a close of a inspection report. Today, I'm going to take you through the inspection procedures from FDA's view. I won't have time to go over everything that happens during an inspection, everything that gets looked at, everything you can do to get ready, but I'm going to cover major points and help you understand why things are happening that may be happening during the inspection and perhaps how you can respond appropriately. I first want to simply start off with the FDA's definition of inspection. You can read it there yourself. It's a careful, critical, on-site examination of a facility to determine compliance. And the main point I want to make, though, is that FDA inspections are systematic. There are specific things that are covered throughout the inspection, and they do vary by product and program and type of inspection, but they're generally done in a systematic approach. And by systematic, I mean we're looking not at the things going on specifically, but more at the systems that are causing those things to happen. And just quickly, I'm going to go through the definition. Critical means that it is a review of the merits and faults found in those systems and processes that are being reviewed. Official means that it is a government operation with a government report. Inspections and inspection reports are for internal government work and for public release. Everything that is seen and heard during inspection may become public. That's important to keep in mind during the inspection. There are exceptions. FDA protects trade secrets and commercial confidential information observed during inspection and is not authorized to review financial and personnel information. But generally speaking, the information found during inspections you should expect could become public. It also says inspections are conducted on site. That's also important. During COVID, FDA started doing some off-site inspections, but those have been pretty much eliminated. There may be cases where some records are reviewed off-site, but generally FDA is going to be in your facility, which means they're going to be kind of a nuisance. They're going to be in your way, and you just need to realize that and be ready for it. And finally, an examination of a facility means a close look at the operations in a single facility. They won't be looking at more than one facility at a time, only at the facility where they show up. Okay, I do want to address foreign versus domestic because I know we have many companies that are outside the US that may be joining us. And I also want to address 704A4 information requests. So there are a few differences between foreign and domestic inspections. Most foreign inspections are pre-announced. FDA is trying to do some unannounced foreign inspections. They may even be ramping those up. And FDA has some foreign offices that may be conducting inspections without pre-notification. Typically, I believe in China and India, although there are other locations that FDA has offices overseas as well. Logistics, though, for unannounced foreign inspections is difficult. FDA does the pre-announcing so that they can assure that they're going to the right location, the location that actually makes the products that they're interested in, that the location is open. Some facilities close for a week or even a month at times, and they don't want to spend the money to send somebody overseas when in fact the facility is closed or they're going to the wrong facility, because it isn't uncommon for FDA to have incorrect information in its database when it's trying to figure out what firms to inspect. And then 704A4 information requests. These are sometimes referred to as remote regulatory assessments. The part of the law, 704A4, that covers these remote regulatory assessments does not apply to food facilities. It only applies to device, drug, and some bioresearch monitoring inspections, or not inspections, but information requests. FDA uses RRAs to assess various things, compliance primarily, but also to save on resources for travel. FDA assesses corrections to previous inspections so that they don't have to travel somebody to a geographically difficult to reach place. In the food area, they are doing these. They are voluntary in nature. If you participate, you can withdraw from an RRA at any time. That's important. If you feel like things aren't going well, you can simply tell FDA, I no longer want to participate in the remote regulatory assessment. If a remote regulatory assessment is requested by FDA, you should have an opportunity to discuss it with FDA before you begin. Determine why they want to do it. If it's to evaluate corrections from a previous inspection, confirm information you may have, you could avoid an inspection by participating in an RRA. I also want to mention foreign supplier verification program inspections are the only inspections FDA can conduct remotely. Sometimes they're called remote regulatory assessments or RRAs, but they are officially inspections that can be done remotely. And at the close of those, FDA does issue a notice of an inspectional operations summary, a 483, to describe any deficiencies that they note. Okay, so let's begin discussing by laying out who exactly FDA investigators are. FDA investigators are called consumer safety officers. You may hear me say CSO. That's kind of the common phrase used within the agency for investigators. They carry credentials and a badge, but they are not traditional criminal law enforcement agents. They enforce Title 21 of the federal code, not Title 18, which is what FBI and other law enforcement agencies enforce. FDA does have over 200 criminal law enforcement agents who do enforce Title 18, but they're investigating crimes that involve FDA products, but are typically things like tampering, Medicare fraud, things like that. They must present a judicial warrant in order to enter your facility and collect evidence covered by the warrant. They typically would not be concerned with food manufacturing or food processing, food storage. The investigators we're talking about routinely inspect manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution centers. Most CSOs have at least a Bachelor of Science degree in one of the major sciences like biology, chemistry, physics, or an engineering degree. The requirement is to have at least 30 semester hours of college credit in sciences and/or engineering. They each receive specific training in FDA law, in collecting and documenting evidence, and in interviewing people. They are not trained in interrogation techniques. Most will have a good deal of inspection experience and will have completed an audit by a seasoned FDA investigator. FDA investigators are expected to be audited annually by their supervisor. Each investigator is hired to work in one program area. Human foods is one such specialization. Animal foods, including medicated feed, is a separate specification. If you manufacture more than one product on the list, you may have two CSOs arrive at the same time to do an inspection to cover the two different areas of your facility. For example, if you make dietary supplements and OTC drugs, or cosmetics and OTC drugs, you may have two FDA investigators arrive at the same time, or you could have two distinct and separate inspections, one covering one product and one covering another. FDA tries not to inspect the same facility within the same year, but that's just general guidance, and they could arrive two separate inspections to cover two different program areas in a year. FDA investigators receive specific training in the areas where they're working. For example, they have training in preventive controls in seafood, juice HACCP, foreign supplier verification, produce, and other food areas. There are some CSOs who specialize in one particular industry, like the dietary supplement industry or infant formula and medical foods. Having said that, they know a lot about the program. They aren't experts in what you specifically do. They are experts on the rules and regulations related to that program, and they have likely seen facilities similar to yours. Okay, so they're going to do some preparation back in the office before they arrive, and we're going to talk about that. They're going to know a lot about you before they arrive, especially if you've had previous inspections. They have likely, if there was a special assignment, they've likely talked about that assignment with their supervisor. They may have spoken to people at the headquarters office, sometimes called the Human Food Program office. It used to be called CIFSAN, now it's called HFP. If there is an assignment memorandum, they are not permitted to share that assignment memorandum with you, but they will likely discuss it with you. There's usually information specifically they need that they wouldn't normally get during inspection, and they will go over that with you if there is a special assignment. They've looked at previous inspection reports. conducted at your facility to see what problems or issues have been seen in the past and to become familiar with their operations. They may review inspection reports from other facilities if you have other facilities that make the same products. For example, if you're a large company like a General Mills, Quaker Oats, and you have many facilities that do the same kind of operations, they may review inspection reports from other facilities that make similar products. They've checked for complaints that FDA has received since the last inspection in any reportable food registry or RFR reports and any recalls. They also have many references. I put 2 of them down here. These are the major references that CSOs are going to review. The compliance program, there's specific compliance programs related to the different types of different areas where they work. I'll mention one particular one, and that has to do with sampling. I mentioned that one because it covers all different program areas in the food area related to sampling of different products. So that one covers multiple programs, but most of them cover one specific program like PC or LACF. And also there are inspection guides. Some of those are very out of date, but there are still many that are available for them to review if they need to. Okay, let's dive into the inspection process itself. We're going to talk about why FDA inspects facilities first. I list 3 different reasons. Some people may break it down differently, but there are just routine inspections. These are inspections to determine compliance with the general regulations, preventive controls, seafood HACCP, juice HACCP, etc. There are many different programs, so there are many different routine inspections. If you make more than one product, for example, if you make both preventive controls products and seafood HACCP products, you may have essentially 2 inspections in one where they're covering 2 different compliance programs. Special assignments come out every year and throughout the year. I've listed a few of the reasons why there are special assignments. FDA has a process where potential programs are identified, and a group of subject matter experts are brought together to discuss and develop ways to address and learn more about the problem they're looking at. Sometimes, if there are new requirements, FDA issues assignments to determine what industry compliance is like. For example, there was recently added sugar was looked at closely by FDA to see what compliance with the added sugar requirements were on labeling. Normally, FDA doesn't publicize assignments while they are ongoing. However, they do sometimes conduct industry outreach. They reach out to different organizations or companies prior to or during the development of an assignment. FDA sometimes publishes reports after assignments are complete. There's one up right now related to cinnamon. There was, you may recall, a recall of cinnamon applesauce puree in 2023 because of lead in the cinnamon. FDA began a special assignment sampling ground cinnamon that resulted in a number of recalls. In fact, I believe I just recently saw another recall or safety alert related to cinnamon, lead in cinnamon. So FDA will publish those findings when they believe it is in the interest of public health, in the interest of the industry, or in the interest of just the public in general to know that information. Some special assignments are related to national preparedness. These aren't usually discussed closely. There is some stuff on FDA's website about these, but it's looking at food production where food may be going to political conventions, international summits, things like that, to make sure that there's a food defense program in place to protect the food from possible tampering or adulteration, intentional adulteration. Others are done for targeted surveillance to engage industry specific. The last time inspection are for-cause inspections. You may think of these as inspections to follow up a warning letter or some other compliance action. That isn't the only reason FDA does for-cause inspections. For-cause means the agency has some reason to believe that an inspection is warranted based on reports or information that the agency has received. For example, an assignment to inspect a certain type of company because of an outbreak at one particular firm may be warranted when FDA notes a reason for the outbreak that could be a problem at several other firms. It's important to stay abreast of issues in your industry, recalls in your industry, so that you are addressing the same problems others are having. That way, whether FDA starts an inspection based on those problems at your facility, even though your facility may not have been involved, you are staying on top of them to make sure you're taking care of those issues and are ready when FDA inspects and if they should ask specific questions. And again, I mentioned this, but prior violations you may have had, a follow-up inspection may be issued for that too. Okay, what happens during inspection and what are the limits on inspections? We're also going to discuss at some point what you can do when you feel an inspection may be going too far, where you aren't, where just things are happening that are kind of feel out of control. I do want to say, in an effort to prepare for FDA, I believe that one of the best things that you can do to prepare is to do everything you can to make the investigator's job easier. They want to get the inspection done as quickly as possible, and I know you do as well. So helping them to do that is a great way to get ready for them. And we'll talk about ways you can prepare so that you can help them move quickly through the inspection. Okay, so the inspection starts with day one. I mentioned this, you probably won't be notified before FDA arrives unless you happen to be a foreign firm. Can I promise FDA will always notify you if you're outside the US? I can't, I mentioned that, but I think they probably will. For US firms, they will be driving daily either from their office or a hotel nearby. This is important because depending on where you are, they may spend more or less time at your facility. When I was in Chicago, I would make sure that I left a facility before 3 p.m. simply because of traffic to get back to the office. I still wanted to get home for dinner. I wouldn't stay till 5 o'clock at a firm and then have to commute an hour, hour and a half back to the office so that I could then go home. When I was in West Virginia, if I was close to the office, I would stay till 4:30 or 5 sometimes. It really depends on how close they are or how close their hotel is to your facility, what time they may arrive and what time they may depart. When they arrive, they're going to have to park their vehicle unless they're taking a ride share or taxi. So convenient parking really starts things off right. If you have visitor parking at the front entrance, that's a great thing to have for them. It will make their lives easier, especially if they have to do sampling and bring in a large number of boxes or containers to put samples in and then carry those samples back out with them. They will arrive in the morning. I mentioned sometime typically between 8 and 10. FDA does not like inspections starting after lunch. They like them started before lunch. That's not a, it's not an official policy, but it is a understood policy by FDA investigators and their supervisors. They'll use your visitor's entrance if you have one and present themselves to a receptionist or whoever greets them through the door. I want to note that their parking, arrival, and walking into the facility is their first impression of the firm. This really does lay the groundwork for how they feel about your firm. A clean exterior, free from weeds and overgrowth and trash, really says a lot to the investigator about your facility. So it's important to have your facility look as presentable as possible from the outside. The same goes for any reception area where they may walk into. Having a clean and tidy reception area really starts things off right. When they are greeted by a receptionist or whoever meets them, that individual should know who to contact before they arrive. You should decide who you want the receptionist to contact and who can be there relatively quickly. Do not leave an FDA investigator waiting for an extended period of time. If it takes more than 5 or 10 minutes for someone to meet them, they're going to start to wonder what's going on, and they're going to start to think you may be trying to hide things from them. A brief wait, 5 minutes, 10 minutes isn't viewed negatively, but if it starts going into 15 minutes or even longer, they will start getting antsy and they may even issue the 482 to the receptionist just so they can get started. If you're a smaller company, don't have a receptionist, don't have a visitor entrance, FDA may just knock on the door and walk in, or they may go around to receiving and shipping because there's normally somebody there during the day and they will present themselves there. It's important to understand that because everybody should be prepared to meet with FDA should they arrive unannounced, not just a receptionist. If you don't have a receptionist, you need to make sure everybody is ready. When they arrive, the receptionist or whoever greets them should direct them to a vacant conference room or an office or a place where they can sit down, put their briefcase down, pull out their 482 and fill out information on it. If you have a vacant conference room or office, let them use it. Just consider that space to be theirs for the inspection period. An FDA investigator really prefers not to have to go to a different room every day. They like to, if they're reviewing records, they would like to leave the records out so that they can look at them late the next morning. So it's really convenient for them if they're directed to only one place. If that's not possible, then it's not possible. But if it is possible, try and make that happen. Then they'll have the initial meeting. They need to go over things and they need to issue the 482. The investigator wants to issue the 482 to the owner, operator, or agent in charge. That means the most responsible person available. If the plant manager, operations manager is available, then that's great if they can be at the initial meeting, but don't delay the initial meeting for them. Most companies have FDA meet with the head of quality control or regulatory affairs, someone of that nature. That's fine, and they will issue the 482 to that individual so they can start their inspection. But at some point during inspection, they will likely want to speak to the plant manager, operations director, whoever runs the manufacturing side of things. So if that person can be made available during the inspection, it's great to have a meeting with them at some point with the FDA. During the initial meeting, you have an opportunity to give some background on your company. They're going to ask you questions about your company. How much money does your company make? How much money does your company bring in every year? How many employees you have? Those sorts of general administrative issues. They're going to ask those questions. You can take this time to explain what your company does in detail, give them enough information so that they're aware of what you do. If you happen to have a company prospectus, if you're a public company, you can share that with them. It answers a lot of their questions for them as well. They will likely want a facility organization chart or a corporate organization chart. If they don't ask for it at the initial meeting, they will ask for it at some point during the inspection. They will also likely request a plant floor plan or production schematic for various products. I would encourage you to have those readily available. This is also your chance to lay out expectations for the inspection and any details you want them to know. For example, if you require employees to wear hard hats and safety shoes or safety glasses, you should tell them. If you expect them to have phones in their pockets and not carried around or leave them in the office, tell the FDA investigator that's your expectation. If there are areas with restricted access, let them know beforehand so they don't try to go into a room and you tell them you can't go in there, it's restricted access. If you expect them to review a safety document before entering, make sure they know that and provide them with that document quickly. Regarding documents like possibly a safety training document where you expect people to sign that they've read through it or reviewed it, they will tell you they can't sign those documents. If you press them and say it's a requirement, they will probably sign them, but just be ready for them to push back on any signatures. This is also your time to mention that you do not permit photography. They will challenge it. They may cite 2 legal cases and explain that refusal to permit photography is a refusal to allow inspection. However, the process of taking action related to refusal to allow photos is cumbersome and is only done internally when there is good reason to want those photos. Unless this is a specific for-cause inspection, they will not have a really good reason that they can communicate to their supervisor and to others simply because you refused at the outset of the inspection. In most cases, you are safe refusing to allow inspections at this point. I believe a good tack to take is to suggest to them that you would like to have a discussion with them when they need to take a photo. And at that point, address the issue and tell them you're going to refuse until they tell you you need to take a photo. That way you can determine what they're taking a photo of, and you can have a conversation about why they need that photo. Sometimes they take photos simply so that they don't have to write things into the report, not as evidence per se. Let me talk about why FDA likes photos specifically. The main reason is photos are used as evidence of violations. This is why refusing them can be really important. However, FDA also uses them to save time. A good example is when they're conducting environmental sampling during an inspection. Photographs demonstrate where the samples are collected, how they're collected, proximity to equipment, proximity to other things. All this is extremely helpful in shortening the amount of time it takes to collect the sample, because if they can't take the photo, they're drawing a diagram, they're writing out explicitly details about where the sample is being taken, and it can drag out environmental sampling. It will speed the process if you do let them take photographs during environmental sampling. At this point, they may make an initial request for records. It may include product information, preventive controls, or SOPs. Whatever it is, you should have it ready for them. If they choose to take a tour at this point, try and have it ready for them when the tour is completed. Some CSOs want to review records before they do the tour. Under the PC program, they're supposed to evaluate one of your products and determine their judgment of what the hazards are and preventive controls that they would put in place. That's in the compliance program. So they may want to do that before they do the tour. Regardless, typically on the first day, they're going to want a tour of your facility. So let's talk about the tour. Well, before we talk about the tour, I'm sorry, let's talk about legal limitations on inspection. I mentioned this. FDA investigators must be credentialed. The credential is in a wallet. They will display it to you. It will have an expiration date. If the expiration date is passed, you can refuse the inspection legally. You can tell them you don't have valid credentials, so you cannot inspect my facility. They also must issue the Form 482, except on foreign inspections. On foreign inspections, there is no requirement to issue a 482. The inspection is considered voluntary of foreign facilities for the most part. It isn't really voluntary because if you don't let them in, they will refuse your product at the border, but there is no law giving them authority to inspect your facility. Generally, only one notice of inspection is issued. They won't issue a new one each day. When they will issue a new one is if a new CSO joins the inspection or if they're gone for several business days in the middle of an inspection. For example, if they get sick and take 3 days off, they may issue a new notice when they arrive. Issuance of a new 482 does not mean a new inspection is started. It simply is a way for them to document who is there, the days they were there, that sort of thing. I cite here guidance FDA has on delaying, denying, limiting, and refusing drug and device inspections. This has nothing to do with foods. I want to be very clear, but I do encourage you to review that guidance. It provides FDA's thinking on what could cross over into food inspections in terms of denying an inspection. For example, refusal to allow photographs under that guidance is a refusal to allow inspection. Another example of refusing to allow inspection would be refusing entry, obviously, but also sending people home. So if you're scheduled to operate and make product and you decide you're going to close the doors when FDA comes and you're going to send everybody home and not manufacture, that would also be considered denying or refusing an inspection. Or not allowing inspection of laboratory records until after review by management. So the laboratory may do some tests and that may be reviewed by the head of QC. If you don't let FDA review those records before QC management reviews them, that could be considered a denial. And these are some of the limitations put in the law, 21 U.S.C. 374. I mentioned the appropriate credentials and a notice to the owner, operator, or agent in charge. I also want to point out at the end of this, reasonable is used 3 times. Reasonable actually does have a legal test. Reasonableness is based on what a normal person, not you, not FDA, would consider to be reasonable. So let's talk about reasonable times. What's a reasonable time to do an inspection? Basically, if you're open for business, it's reasonable. If the head of QC isn't present, but the firm can operate without them, if the plant manager isn't present, but you're still making products or shipping products, it's reasonable to do an inspection at that time. What if the facility is literally closed? Maybe you take a week off for maintenance and the only thing happening is maintenance and maybe QC directors in their office. Well, that's not reasonable to conduct an inspection unless it's related to things not related to the production of food. For example, if there's concern about a particular lot of product and FDA wants to look at that production lot and any testing done on that lot, and somebody is there that can provide them with those records, that may be reasonable to inspect then because of the fear of public health concern about a specific product. And what if your plant closes at 5 p.m.? I've been at facilities that have a hard closing time in the afternoon. It is reasonable to expect the FDA to be done with their inspection when the plant closes and not to stay there and continue to review records. So I would lay out for them, our facility closes at this time during the day, and we need to make sure that the facility is empty at that time. Reasonable limits means that they can look at pretty much everything except certain financial and human resource records. The records they can look at are laid out both in the law and in the regulations. So you can look those up there. One of the questions that sometimes is asked is, what about interviewing people? Is that reasonable part of an inspection? Most people would consider interviewing somebody to discuss food safety or products being made is reasonable. So limiting an interview of an individual may be considered limiting or refusing inspection. When a CSO is reviewing a record created by a manufacturing employee, reviewed by QC employee, they may want to ask the manufacturing employee what they know about the data they're recording. Do they actually know what numbers are within specifications? Do they know what to do if they're not in specifications? These are all reasonable questions for a CSO to ask. They may want to ask QC what precisely they're looking for when they review the records. They're trying to determine the qualifications of the person creating and reviewing the records. They're not trying to trick anybody. They're simply trying to understand what the people understand so they can determine if that person is qualified to do the job. And lastly, inspections must be done in a reasonable manner. Really, that just means that they should treat you professionally and respectfully. If they are not, they may be violating that part of the act, and we can talk about that a little bit later. And they also should be following your company policies related to safety and other issues, protection of the food. So if you have specific policies related to that, they should follow those policies. Here's a list of records FDA is likely to review. We should probably discuss record review a little bit. I mentioned that they're looking to see that the items are understood by the employees when they interview them. They're also looking at the items to see what controls are put in place that you've identified in your HACCP or preventive control plans. If FDA requests a record that you do not actually maintain, you do not need to provide it to them. Sometimes they may request summaries or lists that you are not required to maintain under the regulations. For example, if they're following up on specific FDA complaints, they may ask you for a list of all complaints received over the last year, 6 months or something. If you don't maintain a list of all complaints, you do not need to provide a list to them. If you choose to create a list like that, you should identify it as created from original records for FDA during the inspection. I suggest you do that and make it clear that it is not an official record, because if there is a problem with that record, they won't be able to cite that as a problem with your records program. It is possible an FDA investigator may want to take records with them, especially on foreign trips. They may want to take them to review in their hotel in the evening or over a weekend, especially if there's a lot of records to review. Do not ever let them take original records. So if they tell you, I want to review the original records for product being manufactured today, and those are the only make copies for them, or make sure they don't walk out with your original records. Also, keep track of all records FDA reviews, and keep track of all records that FDA asks for copies of. Records are collected for a couple of reasons. Sometimes an assignment requests collection of certain records. Sometimes records are collected so that they don't have to write down details about something in a report. But most often, records are collected as evidence of violations. This means that the record is related to an objectionable condition that will likely appear on the 483 later. I'm not planning on addressing 483s during this presentation. I'll cover it during the next one. But I guess I should say that the 483 is a list of significant conditions noted during the inspection that indicate your product is adulterated and for which FDA may take action in the future. Continuing. So during some inspections, I mentioned that they may want to review records before they conduct their inspection, or they may want to simply sit down and do a hazard review of their own to see if you are covering the hazards they think exist for a product. They may want to look at some SOPs before they walk out so that they can try and identify if people are following the SOPs. But generally, they're not going to really review the records before the tour. Speaking about the tour, what is the tour? The tour is really them walking through your facility to get an initial layout. This is why a floor plan is really nice, so they can understand where's receiving done, where's production done, where's packaging done, where are the critical control points that you're controlling, what specific locations. So later, if they do want to look at a particular critical control point, or they want to focus in on packaging, they know where they need to go. So, and they can tell you, I'm going to go to this location, and you'll know where they want to go, because I'm going to cover packaging today, and they understand that. At the end of each day, and particularly on the first day, there will be a closeout meeting. They should tell you, we're going to have a short closeout. They're typically very brief, but they will discuss any observations they think need correction. They may not say they need correction. They may say, oh, I observed this, 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 this. They may list 3 or 4 things that they observed. When they list those, you should consider those to be violations that will appear on the 483. You should also ask them, if they don't tell you, where do you plan to start tomorrow? Because they generally have an idea of how they're going to do the inspection, so that you have a heads up in case they need more records, you are prepared, or if they want to talk about specific production, you can have the people available, or you know who they may want to interview. You should also ask them, if they don't tell you, what time they plan to arrive the next day. Sometimes they'll arrive later in the morning on the first day because they may be traveling into town, and then they may have a hotel close by. So they may want to arrive earlier. Just simply ask them before they leave, what time do you think you'll be here tomorrow? After the meeting, make sure everybody knows what happened and anything that may need correction. Work on those corrections. Even though they're simply discussion items at this point, demonstrating corrections to those items during the inspection says a lot about your desire to comply with the regulations. Okay, day 2 and every day following until we get to the last day. The FDA CSO will either be reviewing records, looking at operations, or interviewing people. I do want to specifically address interviews here. Interviews are generally fairly casual. While walking through an area, they may want to ask questions of an operator or a lab analyst. They're trying to determine if that person knows what they're doing and can explain to them why they're doing it. I would recommend allowing them free access to people, but I would also recommend keeping track of who they talk to and what they talk about. If it is an operator during production, it may be difficult to hear the conversation going on. So there are a couple things you could do. You could discuss with the operator afterwards, what did FDA talk to you about? What answers did you do? Or you could simply bring the operator into the conference room to talk directly with the FDA and with you so that you can understand what they're asking. FDA is not trying to trick people. They do want to understand the operations, the testing, determine if the people doing these things are qualified to do them. When I was training CSOs, I told them, don't spend your time reviewing training records, spend your time determining if the individuals know what they're doing. Training records can say one thing, but actually doing the things really indicates that they understand and that they are qualified and trained to do them. At the end of each day, there will be a closeout like the first day. Follow those same procedures like you did before. Ask what time the CSO will arrive, during the closeout, where they want to start, etc. Another point, they may skip a day and not inspect on site. There are a number of reasons that can happen. Generally, they would tell you at the end of the day, I won't be here tomorrow. They may have training they have to go to. They may have a personal issue that they have to deal with. For whatever reason, they may not come one day. That doesn't mean the inspection's over. It simply means that they have other things they have to take care of. If they don't tell you that they're going to skip a day and they don't arrive, just assume that you've got the day to do your regular work or to start working on corrections. Sampling. I need to specifically address sampling. All FDA cases start with a sample. Could occur at any time during the inspection. Generally, environmental samples are collected on day 1. They usually bring a team in, 4 people generally, 3 or 4 at least, to do environmental sampling just so it can be done quickly. So if it is a sample collected on day 1, it's generally an environmental sample. I do want to also mention official samples. FDA has a definition for official samples. Official sample is a product that is part of a lot that travel in interstate commerce for which there's evidence of the traveling in interstate commerce. There are a couple reasons for sampling. Surveillance samples are commonly collected for a variety of reasons, including special assignments. They could be tested for any number of things: pesticide, aflatoxin, colors, microorganisms, etc. With the sample, FDA may collect records showing travel in interstate commerce and typically an affidavit describing that sample, how it was collected, records associated with the sample. An affidavit is a statement that is equivalent to what a person providing the records and the sample to FDA would say if they were in court and had described the sample in the records. It doesn't really matter if you sign the affidavit or not. FDA will ask if the information is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. If you say no, they will ask you to correct it until it is accurate. I want to be clear, you will not get in trouble over the affidavit, and it generally will contain no incriminating evidence other than interstate commerce of the product. You can simply refuse to sign the affidavit or refuse to read it, or you can walk out of the room when they pull out their affidavit pad. But like I said, from FDA's standpoint, it doesn't matter. If there's a legal case, they will use the affidavit that the CSO wrote themselves, whether you've reviewed it or not. I'm going to skip over the two types of samples, 702B and 704D, for the purposes of time today. I do want to mention, if it is a 704D sample, they will notify you of the results. They will also notify you of the results if you voluntarily hold a product. Voluntarily holding a product is really important for a couple reasons. When FDA collects a sample of a finished product, if that product turns out to be violative based on their analytical tests, then shipping that product in interstate commerce would be a violation of the act, and it would be a charge that they could take against you. Besides the product being recalled, you face other penalties for shipping it, a product in interstate commerce that is violative. So I strongly recommend holding product. If FDA is collecting environmental samples and you are able to hold product until those results are back, and they could take a week, that's a good idea. But I do want to mention that very few environmental samples are ever found positive. I've reviewed many of them, and even when there are cannot rule out samples, a cannot rule out simply means that FDA collected a sample and their initial test cannot say that it is or isn't a pathogen. FDA will notify you. Even those are most frequently negative. So unless you've had a significant problem in the past, FDA's found problems before, or your own environmental sampling has found a problem, you're probably safe shipping product after environmental sampling. But if you are able to hold product, it's still a good idea to hold it until you know those results. Also, if you tell FDA I'm voluntarily holding, they will try and get you the results as quickly as possible so that you can ship that product. And I mentioned environmental sampling already. Photographs, I did mention this too. I encourage you to allow them to take photographs during environmental sampling. You can approach it like, we don't allow photographs in our facility, but we will allow you to do them while you are collecting environmental samples. It simply will make the inspection, that environmental sampling stage of the inspection, go quicker. It may make it take half a day or 1 day instead of a full day or half a day or 2 days. So I do encourage you to allow that. It does take a significant amount of time, and it is done by a team, and that team may very well not come back during the rest of the inspection. The final day of the inspection. So we've finished the inspection. FDA has told you, I'm done with my inspection. Tomorrow we'll have our closeout. During the closeout, and typically closeouts happen on a separate day from the normal days of inspection, although they could happen at the end of a day, especially if there's no 483 being issued. They could very well just have verbal observations that they want to share with you. And so in that case, they may do it on the last day of the inspection rather than on a separate day. Also, typically, they may take a day off between their last day of inspecting and the issuance of the 483. This is because they want to make sure it's accurate. It may need to be reviewed. Some CSOs will have all their 483s reviewed by their supervisor. If it's significant and there may be a legal case involved, then or a warning letter, then likely HFP or CFSAN, the headquarters office that related to food, is going to want to review it before it's issued as well. I'll discuss 483s in detail at the next presentation, but I did want to mention that on the final day, they're going to get any additional administrative information. Most CSOs have a list of information they have to collect on every inspection so they don't forget anything. So they'll go over that list, and they may have forgotten to ask how many employees work at your facility, or how many employees overall does your company have. So they may ask for some basic administrative information. They may do the affidavit and record collection on that date as well. They're supposed to issue the receipt for samples. It's called the FDA 484 at that point. They may have issued it earlier, but the law says that they issue it at the close of the inspection. Most will issue it on the last day before they issue the 483. After they do their administrative work, issue the 484. On the 484 also, there's a box for them to check on how much the sample costs. You are free to charge FDA for the sample. You charge them going rate, I guess is the best way to put it. You know, what would be your cost for the product? So if they collect 12 cans of food, what would those 12 cans cost? You have to bill the agency, and then the agency pays you. The CSO won't give you cash or won't write you a check. Most companies just provide samples free of charge, and some products they won't allow you to charge them for, like environmental samples. You can't charge FDA for collecting environmental samples. Then there'll be a discussion with management. Who should attend that discussion? I encourage you at this point, because they've told you ahead of time and allowed you an extra day, have everybody who is available attend. And I don't mean the whole plant, but I mean the owner operator in charge, the CEO, the head of quality control, the head of operations, the plant manager. If you have a conference room big enough for all those people, or if they can call in, even off-site individuals, like the CEO of the company may be off-site. If they can attend virtually, that's great. And what that really does is it demonstrates to the CSO that your company is taking the 483 or the closeout meeting seriously. So I encourage you to have the highest ranking officials possible attend that meeting. Generally, they aren't too terribly long, but allow an hour for a 483 meeting. That's typical. That would be typically longer than most would be. There should be no surprises. I mentioned at the closeout of each day, they should be discussing with you any observations they have. All those observations they made throughout probably won't appear on the 483, but in any case, they shouldn't put something on a 483 that they didn't discuss with you, with the possible exception of results of analysis. If they have a positive result from an environmental sample, it could appear on the 483, and you may not have been notified yet, but you may have. Okay. How do you manage the inspection? And I know we're cutting short, so I'm going to go quickly through this, but you need to have a plan. Everybody should know when FDA walks through the door. They should know what they should do. Even if it's just the operator or the person who sweeps up at the end of the day, they should know that FDA could come and talk to them and ask them what they do. Should you have an SOP for inspection? I don't encourage it, but I do encourage you to have a visitor policy. I encourage you to put in that visitor policy. Think about it from the perspective of, what do I want FDA to do before the inspection? What do I want them to do during the inspection? What do I want them not to do, like photographs? The visitor policy is a perfect place to tell FDA you cannot take photos, because none of our visitors can take photos. And it allows you to rely on that document to say that, rather than simply telling them you're not going to allow photos. Use the initial meeting to start things off right. When FDA arrives, make sure everybody knows about it from bottom to top. The CSO has a perspective that this inspection is theirs. It is not yours. You're there to facilitate the inspection, but not to direct it. Having said that, you can influence the inspection in certain ways. Take advantage of that initial meeting. Go over your visitor policy with them. If you can, pull it out. Show them, this is what our visitor policy requires. Make corrections throughout the inspection. If they tell you something on Monday is a problem, if you can correct it by Tuesday morning, and when they walk in the door, you say, hey, I want to talk to you about the correction we made to that observation you made. That is great, because it demonstrates how seriously you're taking their observations. Demonstrate a seriousness about the safety of your products. If you can't correct immediately, share your plan for corrections if you have one, or tell them you're working on a plan. I mentioned this several times. Photographs. I strongly encourage you not to allow photographs. Put it in your visitor policy. Make it clear. Put a sign up. No cameras allowed. I've seen that in many facilities. And lastly, be prepared to work late. You will likely have to work late. Be professional and courteous. Prepare a package for them. List all your products. List the products based on the HACCP plans. If you have HACCP plans or PC plans, these are the products under this PC plan. These are the products under this PC plan. It makes it easier for them to identify, oh yeah, I want to look at that PC plan. I want to look at, because I want to look at that product. Have copies of your PC or HACCP plans readily available. You can put them into that initial package so FDA has them. Copies of PCQI certificates they'll typically want to look at. I mentioned the floor plan, product flow through the facility. All those records could be put together into an FDA package. And when you arrive and meet with them, you can say, when they issue a 482, say, hey, I prepared this for you so that you have this information you probably will want during the inspection. Here it is. Can I go over it with you? They'll either say yes or no. If they say yes, take the time to go over the package that you've got with them. Records need to be readily available. If they ask for a record, it shouldn't take very long to get them. So keep your records organized in a way that you can find things quickly. Resolve issues quickly before closeout if possible. Resolve issues with the CSO. If you're having problems with them, try and professionally take them aside and discuss those issues with them. Have a mock inspection. Dedicated support. You need 2 people, one to stay with the CSO. Don't leave a CSO alone during an inspection, even when they're reviewing records. They may have long times where they're just sitting there reviewing records. That's fine. Bring your laptop, do something else, but don't leave them alone with the records, because if questions come up, they're going to want answers, and you're going to want to get them answers or give them the answer. Don't argue. Be ready to discuss photography. Answer questions accurately and quickly. Be comfortable with silence. They'll ask a question and you may not have the answer to it. Simply tell them, I'll get you an answer before the end of the day or before the inspection ends. But if you don't have an answer to a question, don't try and fill the time with words. Just leave it silent. Treat the FDA like a visitor. If there are problems, if there's confrontation and issues between you or an employee and the FDA, you can feel free to contact their supervisor. Supervisors want to know if there's problems during inspections. The CSO has their perspective. You can give them a different one. There's also an ombudsman who exists to deal with problems during inspections. The email is oii ombudsman@fda.hhs.gov. And now I believe that takes us to question and answer. I apologize, I went a little longer than I'd hoped, but we still have a couple minutes.
We've got, yeah, in the interest of time here, we'll try and finish on schedule. So I am going to go ahead and quickly go through some of the questions that came in, Larry. And if we are unable to get to all of them, and I'm quite sure we won't be able to in the time, please email them to info@registrarcorp.com. Those will get forwarded to a team member here who will be able to answer those for you. So I am going to go ahead and start based on the order of when we receive questions. Larry, some of them I'll answer, others I'm going to send your way. So question one, how many days, months does FDA inspection happen after submitting an inspection form? I assume they get notice, they send back the details to FDA. What sort of time frame can a company expect between giving them what they wanted until their arrival at an actual facility?
Yeah, so it depends. I tell people my most common answer is it's complicated, it depends. You will be contacted, if you're a foreign company, you'll be contacted by what's known as a foreign travel planner. That person will contact you. They will say, we want to do inspection, we want to cover this product, we want to cover this facility. They will schedule it and they will tell you, we'd like to do it on this date. If that date won't work, you have some room for negotiation, but not a lot. I would say typically 30 to 60 days out, unless it's an emergency, unless we know about an outbreak related to your product, then it's unlikely it would happen sooner than 30 to 60 days out. Perfect.
Very good. The next question I'll just answer in the interest of time is an FDA inspection on top of or in addition to a BRC audit. And so just to be clear, BRC, SQF, FSC 22000, those are food safety schemes done, created by third parties. They are not FDA schemes around safety. So an FDA inspection, while it may cover many of the things that a BRC audit covers, there are additional and different requirements from a BRC audit. So just don't confuse, FDA's inspection with a typical BRC audit. Moving on, if I have a company,
David, I see a couple questions about English and local language. Records can be kept in your local language. They may ask for translation. I encourage you to have things like your PC plan, HACCP plan in English already so that you don't have to rush to get that done, but you will have time before the inspection. Typically, CSOs may ask for a local interpreter for them. They may bring an interpreter with them who can sit down with them. Once they understand like a production record or a lab record, they don't really need to understand the words. They know what the numbers are supposed to be. So it's usually a matter of having someone sit down with them who speaks both English and the local language and go over that record with them. I saw that a couple times, so I just wanted to hit that real quick.
Yeah, that's great. I noticed that as well. Can FDA come to Canada to inspect a facility that's exporting, or will the inspection take place when the products enter the US?
Okay, so entry is different than inspection. Product is inspected at entry, and that's done at the border typically, although it may be at the port of entry. Chicago is considered port of entry for like things coming in by train or by mail. So that inspection is of the specific product. The inspection we are talking about here is inspection of the manufacturing site. And so FDA may do a foreign inspection in Canada. I'm trying to remember if we have an agreement with CFIA. I don't think we do. So if there's no agreement with CFIA to exchange inspection information, then we would inspect it. There are countries and products where we have mutual recognition agreements, primarily in the drug area and device area. But if there is an MRA, then your local government inspection could count as an FDA inspection. And I can address some of these also, David, during the next webinar too, if you want to send me a list of ones.
We'll keep all these and try and make sure we get some of them. We'll go another minute or so. I'm at a distribution center experience an unannounced FDA inspection. Is this typical? If you manufacture, process, pack, or warehouse food or beverages for human or animal consumption in the United States, you are subject to FDA inspection. So that is not out of the norm. It's again, you're warehousing food, and so that falls within the realm of an FDA authority and for an inspection for that matter. Moving on here.
I see a question about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is considered part of the United States. All the territories are part of the United States, so that is a domestic inspection. And we even have an office in Puerto Rico specifically. So you have local investigators there.
Yeah. If they go to the shipping and receiving, can the team members tell them they have to go around to the main entrance for proper check-in? That's, I assume, when they show up, an inspector shows up and they go to a side door or a back door. I assume you can redirect them, right?
I think that's a totally reasonable request. I don't think a CSO, if you direct them and tell them where to go, they may get lost. They may park and they may only see the receiving entrance and they may go there. The person receiving could say, hey, we have a front door around the corner. There's parking, or if there's no parking, just say, leave your car here and walk around, because that's where they're prepared to meet with you.
Next question, can you clarify whether an FDA inspection applies only to companies that are registered with FDA, or can it also include other types of facilities? I can answer that quickly. If you're not registered with FDA, they don't know you exist. If you're overseas, which I believe this company asking the question likely is, if you're exporting to the US, you manufacture, process, pack, warehouse products coming to the US, you'll need to be registered because your products won't be able to enter into our port of entry. Once you are registered with FDA, you are in their inspectional database, and they would know to or be able to consider conducting an inspection of your facility. Larry, add anything you want there while I pull up the next question.
No, no, I think that covers it. If you're not registered, FDA is not going to inspect you, or it'd be I should say it's highly unlikely. I can think of a time where we had to inspect a supplier to a foreign firm, and the supplier didn't know that their raw ingredient was going to the US, so they weren't registered per se. But it's going to be that was a case where there was illness outbreak, and they were a foreign company, so they were notified ahead of time. They didn't know that they made a product that went to the US.
Got it. We'll do two more questions, and then I will wrap up here. Please stay on till the very end. Question is, we're privately owned. Are we required to disclose our sales numbers? You mentioned about revenue.
So you aren't required to, but FDA, on our inspection cover sheet, there's a block that says size of business. And what they really want is an idea. So it's round numbers. It's like under $10,000, over $100,000, less than $1 million, over $5 million, So if you give them a range, you're privately owned, and you go, well, we make over $5 million in product. We make over $100,000. They'll accept that. They're not going to push you for specific sales information. It's really just a data point that they want. And it goes into the, possible risk of your firm. The more money you sell, more product you sell, the higher the risk of your facility.
Got it.
Let's get a list of these, and I'll address as many as I can during the next as well.
I'm going to take one last one here, and then I have a quick wrap up, a couple things to say. how is the number of days of an inspection determined?
I could talk about this for a little while. I may have addressed it during the previous webinar as well. So it's really when they cover what they have to cover during the inspection, and when they feel like you're not going to have an outbreak the next day. So there's kind of, there's kind of a, I get comfortable. And this is why I talked about putting the CSO at ease, making them, providing them with information, because the sooner they get that feeling like, yes, you're not going to make somebody sick tomorrow. Because the biggest fear that I always had, and I think the biggest fear every CSO has, is they do their inspection, they say it's NAI, no problems, and then there's a recall. And I have an example of that. I didn't put it in this, but I have an example of a facility that had an inspection in May and then had a major recall in November. To me, I would feel bad if I were the CSO who NAI'd a firm that had a major recall 6 months later. So they're trying to get that comfort level that you know what you're doing, that they've covered everything so that they didn't miss something. So it could go longer, shorter inspections, sometimes a day at a distribution center, sometimes 3 or 4 days at seafood HACCP or juice HACCP facility, sometimes a week. And if there are problems, it could go on longer. And I will write that one down. I'll address that in more detail during the next presentation,
Great.
David.
Listen, we have quite a few questions we did not get to. We will pick those questions out and attempt to address them in the next webinar. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. Obviously, thank Larry for his expertise. We'd love to hear your feedback in our short 3-question post-webinar survey. It helps us plan future sessions based on your needs. Larry will also be hosting another webinar on November 4th, where he'll explain how to respond to a US FDA inspection. So the inspection happens, well, what happens after FDA actually leaves? And we're going to talk about that in the next webinar. How do you respond? Because there's multiple situations that could occur. So we hope to see you there on November 4th. You'll be receiving emails to be able to register for that. Please submit your questions to info@registrarcorp.com. We'll attempt to answer any of those as well, and to answer some on the future webinar. So thank you again for attending. And Larry, thank you for the expertise. Wishing everyone a wonderful rest of your day and week ahead. Thank you so much.